Let's start with this, right? Quick fixes usually fail pretty quickly. That we all love the idea of the like magic hack that's going to solve our problems or the new app or the new whatever. Um, but the reality is most of that stuff doesn't really work. So if you feel like you've struggled a lot, if you feel like you haven't been able to be as productive as you want to be, or as, for your clients or for your students or for your kids, maybe for your spouse, this is why, right? It's because to really actually make changes, it takes some real effort and time, right? Change is hard. And especially if it's not just doing something once or twice, but doing stuff every day and every day and every day. So this stuff does take effort, but also with effort tends to be some improvement. Um, in terms of whether we are able to get something done or not able to get something done, I don't know. There's potentially a lot that goes into it, right? So I'm a psychologist. What I do in real life is I sit in my office here and I meet with clients all day. And I've had many, many, many conversations about the ability to kind of get things done, or alternatively, what got in the way when they didn't get it done. And what it has taught me is that there's lots of different things that feed into whether you get it done. And the first job then is to figure out what exactly is getting in your way here. If you're not able to get something done now, or in hindsight, you couldn't get that thing done yesterday, what exactly is happening there? Like I said, there's things like maybe your environment is distracting, maybe you didn't get enough sleep, maybe your meds have worn off, maybe you're depressed or anxious, maybe someone has unreasonable expectations, right? Lots of other things. We're going to talk about a few specific things that can get in your way. But in general, I tend to think of it as pulling as many levers as you can, right? Like getting rid of distractions. Okay, that makes me slightly more, likely to pay attention to the right thing. Getting enough sleep. Okay, well, I'm a little bit more sort of mentally sharp if I get enough sleep. So let's add that part in, right? And we're just adding in as much as we can. Now, there's a whole nother discussion about how productive do you really need to be? I mean, obviously, we would all like to be more productive. Like, generally, that sounds pretty good, at least if it's free. But how productive do you actually need to be? Because there does come a point where enough is enough. There's also the question when we talk about productivity or struggles with productivity is how much of the problem is that you're not getting enough done? How much of the problem is what other people are expecting of you? And how do you sort of negotiate those possible differences of opinion? But ultimately, my goal here is to share some strategies, to share some ways of thinking so that you can feel a bit more effective, right? More of a sense of agency. I can control what I need to control, and to feel a bit better about yourself in the process. That's kind of what we're hoping for. So, part of being productive, maybe the big part, is being productive on the things you don't really want to do. Nobody needs help getting through their Instagram feed, right? That's pretty fun. Kids don't need help getting through their, video games. That's pretty easy. Also, um, really, when we talk about being productive, it's usually on the things you don't really feel like doing, right? Because that's the stuff that takes more sort of like mental effort to like get over that hump and to get something done. Now, obviously, we would all then prefer to say, nope, not going to do that. That sounds boring or annoying or frustrating. Um, but when you have ADHD, stuff that to other people is just kind of annoyingly boring might be like painfully boring, as in like, oh my God, I would eat my leg off rather than, finish sorting receipts for taxes or whatever. Um, Now, of course, the problem is when we don't do the things that we need to do, even though they are pretty damn boring, um, it tempts trouble in the sense that if you don't do it, it can come around to bite you, right? The thing you didn't get to, someone is unhappy about it, or there's some other problem. Um, but even if somehow you dodge that bullet, right? Nobody finds out and it's totally cool, you still know, right? In your head, there's still that thing of like, I really should have done that. I wish I'd gotten to it. So part of doing what you hate is to just sort of make it a regular habit. And this is often my advice with clients. I literally had this conversation first thing this morning, um, about just scheduling in some time every morning for this guy to just get to the stuff he didn't really want to do. Because here's the deal. He doesn't want to do it at 9 a.m., but he doesn't want to do it at noon, and he definitely doesn't want to do it at 9 p.m. either, right? There's not a time of day or a day of the week where these are things where he's like, yay, I get to research flights. Like not a thing he's ever going to be interested in doing. But if you make a point of saying, this is the time I'm going to do it, right? That you sort of pick a time, put it on your calendar, it makes it a little bit more likely that it's going to happen. Or if you generally, the advice I give is if you plan it for earlier in the day, it's more likely to happen, right? When we say, I'll do this like later in the day, other things in the day happen and they like, bam, they knock that out and we never get there. So, being intentional about when you block out the time, trying to set it up. I don't know, maybe adding in some small reward afterwards. After I do this thing, then I will do this other thing I want to do more, right? It can't be too big a reward, but sometimes a little extra bit of a reward can make it easier to like get over that hump and do it. And when you do spend that time, when you do bite the bullet, and you're like, okay, I just need to do this, give yourself a bit of credit for it, right? Notice the fact that I did this thing, right? And definitely give yourself the credit for doing it. Because if you didn't do it, you would have definitely noticed that and kind of beat up on yourself a little bit. So, this idea of giving yourself credit, I think, is really important. Now, where this gets a little bit subtle, perhaps, is the times when we don't really want to do a task, or we sort of feel like we should, but we really don't want to, or there's something about it that makes us uncomfortable, as in, like, I don't really know what the hell I'm doing here. Um, it's easy for it to just like get forgotten, right? As in, like, oh, I forgot to do it. Or, oh, shucks, I forgot to write it into my schedule or to-do list, or I never set an alarm. It can look like like it's just sort of ADHD forgetfulness, but in this case, it's a bit more sort of emotionally driven in the sense of this makes me uncomfortable. I want to avoid the thing that makes me uncomfortable. So as much as it looks like a time management problem is in the sense of like I ran out of time, or it looks like a memory problem, I forgot to do it, it's really more about kind of tolerating those uncomfortable emotions. So one of the ways of dealing with this then is to just simply accept the fact that if you want to live an interesting life where you get all the benefits of the good stuff that you got going on and you have time and energy to really invest in the things that are meaningful and interesting, then it means sometimes you got to bite the bullet and do the boring stuff, right? This is part of the cost of doing business. So figure out what you need to do, find a time, and just get it done as quickly as possible with as little suffering as possible, just as good as it needs to be, but not better. Just get it done and focus on the good stuff on the other side. And that the point of this is not just kind of dodging bullets or not having people be angry with you, but rather, if I do this, then what are the good things that come from it? How does this set me up for other better things? Now, if you have to do it, right, it's just that thing of like, ugh, I really don't like this. There's this idea that it may not be particularly optional to do the task, although ultimately everything is optional. It's just a question of whether you want to pay the price for not doing it. Um, but while the doing it might not be particularly optional, how much you suffer from it, like that is optional, right? We do have some ability to influence how much we're going to suffer from it. So complaining about it, whether to other people or just rattling around in your head, focusing on how boring it is or how stupid or this is ridiculous or I don't even know why anyone has to do this, all of that might be 100% true and valid. And also, the more that we're sort of like getting caught up on that, and especially if we're like self-righteous about it, it just makes us feel worse, right? Because we're focusing on the negative parts of it rather than just getting it done. Now, I'm not going to say that you're going to whistle while you work and that something awful is going to be good because it isn't going to be. But there's a difference between this is kind of bad and this is awful, right? Less bad is actually like better, right? That's progress. I think there's also something, a place to find a little bit, like a few more drops of motivation is when you don't feel like doing it or you're in the middle and you don't feel like continuing, is to remind yourself how good you're going to feel once you know you did it, right? That knowing I did this thing that kind of sucked and was really hard to keep going, but I did, right? Notice that and to really give yourself some credit for it, or notice it and say, I will give myself credit when I get there. Maybe it's a thing that you say, okay, I'm going to do a half hour of this. I'll just bang away a half hour, or I'm going to work on it until this part, right? So I don't know if you have to read a book, I'm going to read one chapter and then I'm going to take a break. So it gives you a specific end point that you're like, well, I can get to there, right? As opposed to like thinking about the whole thing. Or maybe adding other fun stuff to make it less painful. So listen to fun music while you're doing it, having a podcast going if it's not going to be too distracting, or videos, or calling a friend, or going somewhere else. So like going to the coffee shop or whatever, or adding in some variation. So it's a bit easier to just kind of keep moving and distract yourself a bit from the suffering of it. So let's put some ideas out there. I kind of called the put it to work section, meaning here's some ideas I shared. Let's actually take it out into your life where you can do something with it, because that's actually what we care about. So, what are some boring tasks that you're kind of avoiding? Well, okay, we all have some of those. I've got some of those on my desk right there, but like, what price are you paying for avoiding these things, right? Like, how is it? Is there a tangible price that there's like late fees or something? Or is there just more of a mental price of like, ugh, every time I think about that, it kind of drags me down a little bit. So just being aware of the price that you're paying. Another idea, write out. Don't just sort of passing think about it because those passing thoughts sort of disappear, but like maybe literally think about it and write it out. How was your life better when these dreaded tasks are done? When you really don't feel like starting on something, maybe you pull out that list and you look at it and you're like, oh, right, this is why I'm doing this. Because sometimes when we're stuck and miserable, we can't think of any of these good reasons that might convince us to just bite the bullet and get our way through. And then finally, talking about those times where we sort of set ourselves up, where we're like, oh, shucks, I forgot. Identify those situations where you're tempted to set yourself up to sort of avoid those dreaded tasks, right? What do you tend to avoid? How do you talk yourself into it? Right? This is that whole like, I don't have to write that down kind of thing. Um, but noticing those moments and maybe kind of working on that emotional tolerance that, like, yes, I hate this. Yes, this kind of sucks. And also, I can handle it. I got it. Here we go. Get it done. Move on to better things, right? And to focus on what those better things are on the other side of it. Let's shift gears a little bit then from how do you do the things you don't want to do to let's talk about deadlines. And on the one hand, if you have ADHD, it's kind of easy to love deadlines in the sense of like that is often the place where a lot of things get done. On the other hand, it's also easy to hate them because, like, ugh, God damn it, is this really the thing I have to be doing right now? So deadlines are a bit of a mixed blessing, but the reality is life has deadlines, whether regardless of how we feel about them. One of the big differences between folks with ADHD and folks who don't have ADHD is that if you don't have ADHD, you will feel deadlines further away, right? That it can be days until that deadline, but you're starting to like feel it and think about it. I should probably do it. I should start working on that thing. Whereas when you have ADHD, you don't really feel the pressure of the deadline until that deadline has come to like right here. So one way of putting it is that people with ADHD are much more motivated by deadlines, by close deadlines. The flip side of the coin, the other way of saying it, is that folks with ADHD have a harder time self-generating motivation when a deadline is too far away. Now, of course, if you tend to be a little bit oppositional, no judgment on that. If you tend to be a little bit oppositional, as much as on the one hand, a deadline might sort of kick you into gear, also having a deadline, especially if it feels like it's being crammed onto you by someone else, it can also make you a bit sort of resistant, as in like, you can't tell me what to do, I'm not doing it. Weirdly and kind of funny, sometimes we can be resistant even though it's our own deadline, right? Someone else didn't give it to us, but we gave it to us. Or maybe 3 weeks ago, we gave it to us. And it's this thing of like, "Ugh, I don't want to do it. Don't make me do it." At the end of the day, even if someone pulls out a gun and says, you must file this paperwork right now, you don't actually have to. Like, you literally don't. Even if someone pulls out a gun and says, give me your wallet or I'm going to shoot you, you could choose to say, no, I'm not giving you my wallet. I'm not going to recommend that because it's probably not going to be a happy ending to this story, but like, you don't have to do anything. So when we're being oppositional, it's this idea that like someone is forcing me to do it. But really, really, when you get down to it, what it comes down to is I don't want to do this thing that someone is pushing me to do, but more so, I don't like the consequences of not doing it. So I don't like having to fill out all this paperwork, but if I don't, then I don't know, my car insurance goes up or something, and that feels worse. Or I don't want to study for this test, but then my grade goes down, and then I don't know, my parents give me a hard time or something. So, like, fine, I'll study for the test. And I'm saying this in order to sort of communicate the idea that we are always the one making the choice. At the end of the day, we are always the one who decides this is what I choose to do. I may not love the options I have, but I'm still the one making the choice to do it or to not do it. And maybe that feels a bit better than feeling forced to do something you don't want to do. Now, one of the things that I've noticed with my clients is that as much as there are deadlines that are like real deadlines, as in like at 11:59 it's open and at midnight like click it closes off. Um, there's a lot of deadlines that are kind of soft, as in like, hey, can you get me that report? Okay, like now, tomorrow, before we all die, like when exactly do you need this thing? Also, by the way, do I believe you when you say I need that thing by the end of today? Do you really need it by the end of today? Because I feel like you're kind of lying to me a little bit, or you're just being lazy and not really thinking about when you need it. So do I really need to kill myself to get it to you today? Or is frankly like 2 days from now like literally just as good because you're not going to send it to the client anyway? Um, but the problem for anybody is soft deadlines, deadlines that you know are kind of bogus. Nobody is motivated particularly by soft deadlines, but folks with ADHD are really not motivated by soft deadlines. So, one of the things that I've seen is that folks will sometimes kind of let themselves off the hook a little bit by not actually specifying a real deadline. So, definitely one of the places this shows up is bedtime. If you don't have like a specific time when you're supposed to be in bed, it's really easy for that time to kind of drift and land, who knows where. Now, it might also be, though, that you need to actually take the time to really think about, okay, what is the real deadline? Like, when do I really actually need to get this done? Like, at what point is it fine? And then it begins to become like less fine. If I don't figure this out, if I don't place an order by here, like they're going to start running out of stuff, or the shipping may not be guaranteed, or it's going to cost me more, or like, so like really what is the deadline? And sometimes you need to actually kind of invest the time to figure that out. So one of the ways then, or something that I think is important is this idea, and I kind of mentioned this, of like not feeling the deadline when it's too far away. When the deadline is like way out here, you may not feel it. It's like it exists sort of like in some sort of abstract sense, that deadline is out there, but you're definitely not like feeling that fire in the belly to do anything about it. So, one of the ways then to feel that far away deadline is to begin to create interim deadlines, right? And like teachers do this all the time with like big papers and stuff, so the final paper is due here, but 2 days from now, you need a title and a topic sentence. And then 2 days after that, you need your sources and like blah, 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 right? All the steps out to the final like 6-page paper. So, if you're an adult, that might be more of the thing you need to create for yourself. Um, so I've got this big thing for work. I'm going to get this done by here, and this done by here, and this done by here. But when is it actually going to happen, right? So deadlines that just float out there are less likely to work out, but maybe instead you can schedule in some times. So like every Wednesday from like 10 to 12, like bam, 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 I'm going to block out time and I'm going to work on that project. That's a lovely idea, but also who knows how you're going to feel on Wednesday at 10? Probably not like working on it, I think. Um, so how do you sort of crank up a bit of that, motivation to start working on it? I mean, one way is to use a bit of social pressure in a good way, right? So you might, in the case of work, like set up a thing with your boss where you say, okay, every Wednesday, I just want to send you a quick status update email and let you know where I'm at. Even if your boss doesn't even read the email, if you know you're supposed to send it because like you said something, maybe that makes it a bit easier to find the motivation on Wednesday at 10:01 or 10:15 or 11:15 even. I'll take it to just sort of like, okay, I got to like move this ball a little bit down the field because I need to show that I'm doing something here. I've also kind of come to this idea of just making kind of a silly bet, right? So it could be any sort of stupid bet, just anything that makes it slightly more interesting to do it, right? So it could be like, you make a bet with your romantic partner. Okay, if I don't finish the vacuuming by the time you get home from work, I owe you $5. Now, obviously, it's all the same money, but like whatever. Or if I don't get it done, then you get to pick the show we watch. And I know you're going to pick that really annoying show that makes me crazy, but like, okay, fine. Right? Nobody's going to die. Nobody's going to lose any fingers, but it's just like a fun thing that just kind of kicks up a little bit more juice to get going on it. So let's put this to work. Um, Number one, notice how soft deadlines just lead to creep, right? When there's a soft deadline, it's kind of like no deadline, right? It rounds down to no deadlines. So, what's the final price paid? When deadlines are soft, what actually happens? Or for this task, if I leave the deadline soft, where does this end up? Number two, pick some long-term project. Could be something at work, might be something in your personal life, and break out some interim deadlines. I'll get this done by here, this by here, this by here. How do you motivate yourself to hold to it? Right? Maybe on Wednesday at 10, you like go to the coffee shop and get yourself some, a better coffee than normal. And that's the thing you drink while you're working on it, right? Maybe that would be a thing. Um, or whatever else you would take to like kick up a little bit more motivation. And then finally, um, I don't know, write out a list, kind of brainstorm with your partner, with a friend, maybe somebody at work if you got that kind of relationship. Just kind of like make up a bunch of these sort of silly bets, right? What is just some random fun things that you can just sort of use when you need a little bit more motivation to get going? In this section, we're going to talk about what to do when you're feeling overwhelmed, right? Because life is kind of hard and messy and complicated. And sometimes you just feel overwhelmed and you just don't know where to start. What happens then is if the task feels like too big, too complicated, too many moving parts, and you just can't feel like you just can't sort of wrap your brain around it. Like, I can't understand how all these pieces fit together. I can't figure out what I'm supposed to do with it. Um, or maybe it's more that it's just kind of vague, as in, like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, or it's confusing, or it's just kind of frustrating and complicated. It becomes a situation where we're sort of cognitively overwhelmed, right? That we can't sort of like understand how this all fits together. But then we begin feeling emotionally overwhelmed, right? So you start feeling anxious and frustrated and angry, or you start feeling insecure of like, oh, I should be able to understand this. What's wrong with me that I don't? Everybody else understands it. All that kind of like crazy stuff that we tell ourselves. So obviously, when we're feeling emotionally overwhelmed, we want to get out of there, right? This sucks. I want to go away from this. So the response might be something to sort of bring yourself down, right? Take a few deep breaths, sort of focus. What do my feet feel like on the ground? All this sort of mindfulness stuff, right? Maybe that's the way you go. Or maybe you got to burn it off. Maybe that's the way. So, like, you drop down, you do some push-ups, or you go for a run, or you just go and run up and down the stairs a few times, right? Something to activate your body so then afterwards things come down. Once we've sort of gotten our heart rate down to, double digits and not triple digits, okay, let me start figuring this out, right? I'm going to start investing the energy. I'm going to put myself into this. I'm going to write stuff out. I'm going to circle stuff. I'm going to do whatever I need to do. I'm going to start to figure out, like, what is the deal here? And maybe it's a thing where it's like, look, I'm not going to figure this out in one sitting, but I'm just going to kind of keep at it. Or maybe I'm just going to sit down for a few minutes and maybe let's see what I can figure out then. But it's just like committing to investing the time to begin to try to wrap your brain around it, or bit by bit to begin to get it to sort of make some sense. So when we don't know where to start, sometimes the solution is just to start, right? And that's kind of obvious to say, but sometimes that is what it is, right? It's kind of like the way to start running is like you start running. But maybe the thing that we need to do is maybe we need to go to the person who gave this to us and say, okay, so help me understand here. Like, what are you really looking for? So if someone asks you to sort of put together a presentation or something to say like, okay, is this like internal use? Is this just for us to see? It doesn't really matter if there's spelling errors. Or is this like polish for like executives, or this is for the client or a potential client? Like, how good does this really need to be? Maybe you pull someone else in. You say, okay, I got to do this thing. Like, what would you do? Or like, I'm kind of stuck on this. Like, what do you think? How should I do this? Right. So if you can't figure it out yourself, who are your friends and colleagues that you can ask for some advice? Sometimes when we're overwhelmed and sort of stuck, it's because we don't really know where to start. And maybe the reason why you don't know where to start is because there's a lot of places that you could start, right? So maybe it doesn't actually matter where you start, right? And the stuckness is because you're looking for that one clear place to start and it may not exist, right? So start somewhere, start anywhere. If it turns out it was not a great place to start, you'll probably figure that out once you're in it. Maybe you had to stumble around a bit to figure out like, oh wait, this isn't actually the place to start. Back up. Now what do I know? Now, given what I know, what is actually the place to start with this? And just generally kind of having faith in the process. If I put myself into this, it'll be initially overwhelming, but then my brain will begin to make sense of things, right? It will make connections, it'll start to figure stuff out. Things will like fall into place if I can hang in there long enough and just immerse myself in it. Now, in contrast to starting by starting, sometimes the thing to do is to start at the end, meaning where does this need to end up? What is the final result? Let me work backwards from there, right? Maybe this is the way to feel less overwhelmed. So, why am I doing this? Right? Somebody asked me to do this, or I thought this would be a good idea. Like, why? Why does anybody care about this? Why does it matter? Maybe what problem am I solving? Maybe that's the question to start with. Um, you know, or alternatively, on the flip side, if I don't do this thing, like, what's the problem? Right? Maybe you need to figure out the problem, and from there, then you figure out what the best solution is. But it may not be that it's just sort of immediately obvious what your end point is, right? Maybe you need to sort of just accept the fact that sometimes we need to invest the time to sort of figure this out, and that is part of the job. Frankly, might be the biggest and hardest part of the job, is to just sort of figure out, like, why am I doing this? What is the point? Um, Maybe you need to sort of break it down a little bit. And maybe there's clear steps of like this happens and then this and then this. But maybe you just got to make your own steps of like, this will be the first part. Once I figure that out, I guess then I'll go to this. Sometimes when we feel overwhelmed, it's because the job itself is just too big, right? And the sort of example I always use here is anytime I need to buy a new computer, it is completely overwhelming in about 20 seconds because you start looking on websites and you start like typing in stuff into search, the search bar, and there's like 80 million options. And there's all these brand names and there's all these specs and there's all these like, this is this. And you're like, oh my God, I don't even know what any of this stuff means. Do I care? Like this is 10,000 and that's 9,000. Do I care about like does that first of all, I don't even know 10,000 what. Um but also do I care that it's 1,000 more of this thing I don't even know, right? Maybe, I don't know, maybe it does matter. Also maybe it doesn't matter, right? I'm not trying to like cure cancer or get to Mars with my computer, so it doesn't matter that this one is 1,000 less of something. Um, so maybe then the thing that we need to do is just start making some arbitrary choices, right? So when I was looking for my computer, I was like, okay, I'm not looking at every website in the universe. Like, I don't have the time for that, and it's too confusing anyway. So I picked a couple of websites, and that was it. I picked a couple, some things about like operating system and RAM and hard drive or whatever. Like, click, 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 selected those. All the other stuff, I don't know. It'll fall into place. If you're trying to, assemble a piece of furniture and, has all these parts and screws and nails and like whatever the hell these things are, um, rather than holding it all in working memory and trying to make sense of it, maybe you need to start kind of taking some things out of the equation of like, okay, these are the things I need for step one. I'm only looking like, don't even look at that other stuff. Frankly, like put it over there. Here is what I'm trying to like, this is the only thing I need to figure out. Or if you're looking at directions and there's just too much, right? Scribbling notes in the margins, highlighting stuff, maybe color coding things. All of this makes for less demand on your working memory, makes it easier to hold your attention on the thing to be focusing on in this moment. Just ways of sort of reducing the cognitive burden of what you're trying to do. So let's put it to work. Think of a project that started out overwhelming, right? That initially you're just like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing here. But as happens, right, you sort of stuck in there. You figured it out. What are the lessons learned, right? What did you learn about yourself, about how to approach projects, about how to approach like this kind of a project that you can remind yourself the next time you start getting overwhelmed, right? And maybe we write those ideas down so that we have like like hard paper, whatever, something that we can be like, there, that is what I need to be thinking about right now. Identify a current large project that just sort of feels overwhelming. How do you break it into more manageable parts, right? How do you sort of find a way to chop it down so it's a little bit easier to deal with? And then finally, identify how you could externalize information for some sort of an upcoming large project. so that again, you're not holding it all in working memory, so it becomes completely overwhelming. So it's just sort of an example. I just met with a couple other of the conference co-chairs. We have 350 proposals that people submitted for the conference. You cannot remember 350 proposals. So the research posters pulled those out. The peer supports group pulled those out. Lots of color coding, lots of sorting, sort them by this, sort them by that, right? So there's less that we had to hold in our minds, and then it became a manageable amount of information. So, how do you sort of break this down in a way that reduces the cognitive demands? So, here's our fourth section, which is kind of dealing with ambiguity, as in like, wait, what am I doing here? How's this supposed to be? Like, what's the deal with this? So as much as ADHD can drive procrastination, and as much as anxiety in general can drive procrastination, ambiguity can definitely drive procrastination. And ambiguity could be things like, wait, what am I doing here? It might be more like, how does this need to be done? Like, like, how am I supposed to work on this? Or why are we doing this? Wait, why did the boss ask us to do this? I don't understand what the point is. Um, or you don't know when it needs to be done by, or how long should it take? So again, like, is this like a 15-minute, just bang it out internal use kind of a document? Or is this like spend a few hours, really make it good because the client is going to see this? It can be uncomfortable to not know because within the unknown is maybe, terrible things are hiding. As in, like, here's a thing you didn't know, and now it's going to get you into trouble. Especially if you have a history of, I don't know, not paying attention and missing things that got said, forgetting important details, not keeping track of stuff. So maybe it's one of those situations where it's like, I think some people know what needs to be done, but I think I might have missed it in the meeting and I don't want to ask about it because if I ask about it, then the boss is going to know I wasn't paying attention in the meeting. So maybe inspiration will strike and somehow I'll find out. Now, in these cases, the thing you need to do is to just somehow figure out what's going on. And sometimes the first job is to just figure out what the job is. And that might mean investing the cognitive effort to find out, as in, like, let me really kind of think about this, let me clarify it, let me look through my emails, or let's see if I took some notes, maybe that'll tell me something. But it might also be investing the emotional effort, right? To sort of tolerate the discomfort of this feels really uncomfortable. I really kind of hate this. Also, I just need to figure this out. So I'm going to go towards this even though it makes me uncomfortable, right? So that might mean I need to go talk to my boss and just find out what they want from me, right? Maybe that's the thing. Even though I feel kind of nervous about it, also what I know is if I don't figure it out, it's just going to be worse. So like biting the bullet, here we go. In terms of like why would we suffer through, there's the tangible benefits. If I put together a good, document for, outlining our procedure for whatever this thing is, maybe the boss is going to be happy with me. Maybe I'll start getting some better assignments, right? Tangible benefits. But maybe it's a bit more intangible in the sense of, you know what? That thing was kind of a mess, or I was really kind of like at a loss, like I really did not know what to do, but I kind of hung in there. Like I did the thing anyway. I, went through the discomfort and I figured it out. Like I feel good about myself for having done that, right? Like definitely like pat on the back for that. So, what are the tangible and intangible motivators? How do you talk yourself into working on this thing, even though it makes you uncomfortable? Do ask, do tell. Sometimes it's, like I'm all in favor of kind of working hard and DIY and all that, right? So maybe the thing is you just need to figure out how to do it yourself. But also sometimes you can waste a lot of time figuring it out. So wasting an hour going through old emails and trying to figure it out versus taking 2 minutes to just ask somebody or send a quick email, remind me again, what are we doing with this? Um, and reminding yourself that as great as it is to not have to ask, also, if you get it wrong, if you give them something that's not what they wanted, it's not what we talked about, like this whole thing of they will never know wasn't paying attention in the meeting, that kind of gets outed pretty quickly. So when we need to figure it out, um, again, back to this idea, like have faith in the process. If I stick in there, if I do a few of the right things, right? If I talk to someone or if I take the time of like, let me go through my emails, let me see, copy, paste. Okay, here is a thing. They said, all right, it has to have that. Okay, definitely we're going to put that, we're going to make that bright yellow. Like, definitely need to remember that. Okay, let's look through. Um, if you just sort of invest the time, that ambiguity tends to sort of crystallize down into something where you're like, okay, now I've got a plan, right? And maybe you then take that, here's all the stuff I found in my emails. Just to be sure, let me kind of run this by one of my colleagues. Here's my understanding of what we're doing. Is that like, did I get it all? Did I miss anything? Um, but to just sort of accept the fact that that might be the hard part of the job is just figuring out what the job is. So let's put this to work. Identify what feelings or insecurities ambiguity brings up for you, right? So do you feel guilty that you don't know, or like guilty about having to ask anyone and imposing on them? Do you worry that people are going to think you're stupid because you should know this? Are you worried that people are going to think that, I don't know, you're not a good team player or that you don't really care about other people, right? Like, what are those like negative thoughts that bang around in your head that sort of pop up when you're in a situation of, oh crap, I don't know what to do here? Um, so what are the thoughts and feelings that come up? And then how do you respond, right? What is the behavior? What do you do with those thoughts and feelings? Are they helpful responses or are they maybe not helpful, right? So you're feeling insecure, but rather than sort of biting the bullet on it, you go and you work over here. Like, I'm going to work on this thing. This thing I know what to do with. Great, that's good to get done, but also this is really the thing that you should be working on. So, how do you tend to respond, and how else could you respond? Right? Sort of feel the pull of like, this I know what to do with. I'd rather work on that. And also, I'm not gonna because that's really not the thing I need to be doing. Like, I need to figure out what to do with this. So, who can I go talk to? What can I tell myself to not feel self-conscious about asking somebody else? Number two, create a list of things to tell yourself when you're tempted to avoid clarifying ambiguity, right? When the process of slogging through that ambiguity makes you want to run the other way, what can you tell yourself to keep your head in the game, to stay motivated, to stay psyched up enough to keep moving things along? And then finally, identify one task that you got going now or a project or something where part of what's holding you back is some ambiguity, some sense of like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't know how to do it. I don't know where it's supposed to end up. I don't know how much time to spend. I don't know who to do it with, whatever. There's some questions I have that I don't know the answer to, and it's making me uncomfortable. So, what is one next step I can take? What is one thing I can do that's going to start moving this ball down the field? That's going to start the wheels turning and get something going here. Here's my big advice, especially when we feel stuck, especially when we have bad days, is just keep showing up. A lot of productivity is just about showing up the next time. And whether yesterday was a terrible day where you got nothing done, or yesterday was an amazing day where you got a ton of stuff done, here I am now. Like in this moment, what is the next good thing I can do? Right. So that will rescue bad situations and it will keep the motivation going in good situations. And then finally, my website, adultadhdbook.com. I've got a bunch of information there, including information on my brand new book. This is like literally 2 weeks old, ADHD Productivity Manual. I'm really psyched about it. This presentation today came out of that, and I have a whole bunch of other chapters and material there. Audiobook is hopefully coming out next week. So just final edits are being done on that.